So today we're going to talk about iridology. Now, I have this big, beautiful picture up there on the screen because most people, Manny even said it just himself just a bit ago, he called it iridology. This is not the study of the ear. This is a study of the iris. So just recognize it is actually referred to as iridology because almost across the board everybody calls it iridology. And it is the science and art of iris analysis. And we're going to learn a little bit today about the history before we get into looking at irises. And some of the brief history, it really goes back to an area of the world which was Central Asia, probably about 10,000 BC. So it's an area that would have been, at the time, probably China. And most of the, that's the oldest recorded history. Most of the substantial work in iridology has actually been accomplished by the Germans over the last 500 years. You know, they've really taken it from the art that it was into the science that it was. And there's multiple documentation based on what the Germans have done with it for years. It actually came over to the United States. You know, it was used in conventional medicine here in the U.S., you know, in the beginning of the 20th century. And even iridology, even in this area, Dr. Yanda, you were actually studied under probably the father of U.S. iridology with Dr. Bernard Jensen, you know, before he passed. And actually, the gentleman that I studied under, Dr. David Pesek, was in the middle of apprenticing with Dr. Bernard Jensen at the time that he died. And what was really cool about it and interesting, because Dr. Pesek, and I may mention this later, but I might not, so I want to get this in now. Dr. Pesek, his doctorate is in psychology. So what Bernard Jensen and Dr. Pesek were working on at the time of Dr. Jensen's death was not only looking at the iris from the physical structural component of the body, but also looking at it from a mental and emotional perspective. You know, and that's honestly why I chose to study with Dr. Pesek, because a lot of my work in my practice is also helping people get through and release emotional traumas from the past. So I wanted to see how can the iris actually give us a little further interesting information about the body from that level. So here's, to me, the ultimate preventive medicine tool. Just like the title that most people had heard, you know, iridology, the first genetic testing. That's what we're going to recognize here. And as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the best ways to look at your body from a preventive perspective. You're going to have the window to understand the potential challenges based on predispositions, you know, genetically, or functional imbalances as they arise. So with the information, it's one of the things that I tell clients all the time. If somebody comes in, I'll just give you a hypothetical here. Somebody comes in and they already know they have significant digestive issues, right? So there's other ways that we can assess digestive challenges, but when I can look at the iris, and I'm looking at the portion of the iris that would correspond to the digestive system, whether it be the stomach, the small intestines, or the colon, and I can see that and see that, oh, well, this person genetically has a strong digestive system. Well, then I can actually direct that particular client into understanding, well, you know what, perhaps most of your digestive issues are really lifestyle related or environmental or due to stress, rather than, you know, you just got dealt a bad hand from a genetic perspective. And the other way too. You know, if somebody comes in with a digestive issue and I see cholera, which we'll talk about later, that seems to be showing some pretty significant genetic predispositions to challenges, that's somebody who I would address that person differently. I would say that, yes, we still want to look at lifestyle and what's potentially caused the digestive challenges, but you might be the person who this is going to be a significant, heavy focus for the rest of your life because of the genetic predispositions. You know, and I think that's really invaluable. And also, as mentioned earlier, understanding how the energetic and emotional basis can also create underlying vibrational challenges people as they already show up in a weakened predisposition. So when we're looking at pictures, I'm going to show you some of what I'm talking about that as we move on. Before we get into the iris colors and such, there's one other thing that I didn't put on the slide that I think is so important for everybody to really understand. And that's basically tied into how this works, right? Yeah, because what happens when a client comes in, I'm using a camera such as the one that I have here, where we're getting, you know, a very in-depth, comprehensive picture of the iris. I put it up on the computer screen, so your iris is probably about 6 inches large, and we get a good look at it. And people, I'm sure, are always, before I get into it, they're thinking, well, how does this really tell me anything about my body? and to understand that the optic nerve connects to the back of the eyeball. Via the optic nerve, that nerve connects to every other nervous system tissue in the body, right? But it's not just a one-way street. And let's even think about this too. It's like if I'm standing right here right now and my eyesight is focused there or on different people I'm talking to, and if I'm looking at Gwen here and somebody from across the room throws a ball at me, I might catch that out of my peripheral vision, and I don't have to consciously tell my body to do this to try to catch the ball or stop the ball, right? And so it's happening via the eyesight, picking up something, giving a message to the optic nerve talking to all this nervous system tissue for me to go like that. And it seems so simple and easy to us because it's just a natural, parasympathetic reaction in the body. But basically, it's to understand how the optic nerve is connected to the rest of the nerves. And as I started explaining before, and now we take it a step further to recognize that it's not just what comes in through the iris, through the optic nerve, to all the other nervous system tissue in the body. It's the other areas of their body via the nervous system tissue coming back to the optic nerve and showing up on the iris of the eye. That's the most amazing aspect of this. And it starts with basic iris colors as well as typical predispositions. Now you might find this interesting. Because you've seen people with other color irises than this, right? There's a lymphatic iris or a blue iris. There's a biliary or a mixture of a blue and a brown iris. And there's a hematogenic iris or a brown iris. How many people have seen somebody with a green iris, right? Or like a charcoal gray or a silver gray or anything like that. Well, number one, there's no such thing as a green iris, right? A green iris is somebody who has a blue iris with a yellow haze over it. The blue and the yellow makes green, and the yellow haze tells you that that person is predisposed to kidney challenges. So imagine being me and just walking out and going to the movies and standing in line. You see all these people come through, and you see somebody with and you're going to catch this after today. You see a green iris, and you're thinking, oh, kidney. And then if you go deeper and the emotion component, that's a lack of forgiveness. Now you're thinking, oh, potential kidney issues, and they've got forgiveness issues. You start thinking of these things, and you'll even catch it when you look at, later we're going to talk deeper about pigmentations, and you'll see brown spots in somebody's eye, and you're going to know what that is. And it was the funny thing is early in my career, I had to learn to keep my mouth shut. Because every time I saw somebody with something, I literally would be standing in line and somebody have this big brown spot on their iris, and I'd say, well, I'd strike up a conversation about their liver to see if they knew anything about that, because it's a liver mark. So those are the different iris colors that we're looking at. So the lymphatic iris or the blue iris, is really, it's a blue color, and you see the various shadings such as a blue-white, blue-gray, gray, blue-black, or greenish, but those are all tied into the pigmentations on top of the blue iris. All right, the physical predispositions are an irritation of the mucosal tissue, actually over-acid body chemistry, arthritic or rheumatic conditions, and skin eruptions. And the thought and emotional predispositions could be emotional pain, also forgiveness, diminished flexibility, and limited life perception, so limited self-perception. So these are some of the easy things that you want to just start paying attention to just by knowing the color of your iris if your iris happens to be blue. And a picture of an iris, of course. So here's an example of a blue iris, and you can recognize with this also that you see that this is blue with a white haze overall through this area. So the white haze that you see, that is actually the over-acid body chemistry you would recognize from this person. And we'll go a little bit deeper. You notice the pupillary border right here? This border should be a very fine, distinct black line. And when you start to see the black leaking out into the iris, that's typical of somebody who potentially has low stomach acid. Now, here's what's really interesting when you start to put it all together. So you've got low stomach acid, and this is sometimes confusing to clients. You have low stomach acid, and then you have the over-acid body chemistry with all the white haze within the iris, and they get confused. You're saying I have too much acid and then I'm not enough. Well, we're not really talking apples and apples here. The stomach acid, which would be reflective of just around the pupillary border, that's the stomach acid that we need to break down our foods properly, and especially our proteins, our minerals, and our B vitamins. When we're not breaking those down properly, the body tends to become more acidic. So the pH of the body becomes more acidic, not because we didn't get enough of a super green drink, because some people use that from a marketing perspective. Oh, you're so acidic. Well, since you're so acidic, let me walk you over here, and you're going to buy 2 big jugs of my super green drink, and if you just drink 2 of these once a day, that acidity will go away. Well, that's not the case, because this person, the body is likely acidic because they're not breaking down their nutrients properly. So you start to look at the iris in different ways. Now, the biliary, or the mixture of the blue and brown, the iris genetics may be more of a light brown, greenish, light brown, amber, greenish amber, brown center, or various combinations of the above. The physical predispositions are digestive challenges. It's an interesting thing with this is I have a mixed iris, and you're going to see it up here soon, and that's where my main challenges really lies, in my digestive system. Liver and gallbladder congestion, pancreatic insufficiencies, and intestinal immune deficiency disorders. And the thought and emotional predispositions, I didn't finish that. So I'll actually, we'll have to get back on that one. So here we go with this actually is my iris. And if you really look at me, you don't really see that iris when you see me but up close, I've really got it. You can definitely see the mixture of the blue and the brown, right? And when you look at this, you see the blue and the brown, and how you would understand, because you might think, well, maybe this is really a blue iris, but because they've got some other challenges, you see the brown, because even some of these spots, that could be, there's different thoughts in iridology right now. It used to be that these type of spots were an iron overload or hemochromatosis, but I don't have an iron overload, and I don't have hemochromatosis. And one of the thoughts now in iridology, as our world is, let's say just becoming less clean, is this could be toxic residue and toxic buildup in the body. But the reason why I can tell that my iris is not blue is because when you look in this area, you see the pupillary border, and then the area that borders just outside of that ring where it's brown in the middle. If I was a true blue iris, that would be much lighter in the middle. So that's one of the reasons how you can tell that it's a mixture of the blue and brown. And some other interesting facts, and I'm going to just give little tidbits as we're going through these about other little things we can see in the irises. Like, for instance, this one right here, if you can notice within the iris itself, there's little lines that go around in like a circular fashion around some of the radius of the iris. Those are stress and tension rings. So I can joke about this because it's mine. So somewhere in my life, I went through significant enough trauma to actually put a V groove in the iris of my eye. All right, so, and I can think back, and I can imagine a few times where that could have developed. These are not like rings of a tree where I could tell you how old I was, and I can't tell you, oh, well, this is, number one, well, no, this is the left iris. And do you know how I could tell it's a left iris? Anybody? Yeah, because I can't see. You notice you can't see the corner of the eye. But I can tell this is the left iris because the pupil is, well, actually it's the right iris. The pupil is leaning a little bit further to the right. So that would make, or no, that would make it the left iris. I'm looking at it backwards. So it's the left iris ties into more of the feminine aspects of energy of the body, or the left side of the body. So I can't look at these rings and say, oh, well, you're 14 and it was said something to do with a woman because it's a left iris. It just doesn't work that way. When you see the stress rings, as we're pointing out here, that just means you could recognize that there was significant trauma in the past. That person could have completely worked through that and released that, but it doesn't change. The stress rings never go away. They just fill in, and I always tell my clients it's the remembering of that happy times, basically. So the hematogenic, or the brown iris. So an even matte-like finish. All right, the brown iris should have a velvety, smooth, or textured finish that can range from a light to a dark brown, or even almost like a black-brown type of color. The physical predispositions, number one, liver and gallbladder congestion. iron metabolism dysfunction, blood or glandular disorders, varicose veins, digestive disturbances, and challenges with the arterial system. And the thought and emotional predispositions are anger, resentment, repression of expression, emotional fluctuations, and difficulty receiving from others. Right? And when we start to piece this together with the functional parts of the iris, with the mental and emotional, like as an example, when we talk about the liver and gallbladder issues, liver and gallbladder will typically tie into challenges with anger. So you start to put some of these pieces of the puzzle together, and it's kind of funny as I'm even looking at this now. So remember the thought emotional predispositions I didn't have for the biliary, the mixed iris, and that was mine. Do you think maybe it wasn't an accident that I didn't put the predispositions for that one? If there's anything else we can pick up in this one. And later on we're going to be talking about lacuna, and you could see just at about 6 o'clock from where the pupil is. See that small dark lacuna down there just below that, maybe just a quarter of the way down. I'm explaining all this because there's people are going to get the replay, and I'm not pointing for them. So that's right in the area of the adrenal glands. So this person, the marking there shows a predisposition to issues with the adrenals, and as it gains a depth, so when it becomes darker because it's deeper, that tells us that it may potentially be more than a predisposition. This could be an ongoing issue already. And in understanding the how to assess your constitution and its significance. All right, this is one of the many really cool and exciting things about iridology, because we really can assess either a strong or a weak constitution, and to recognize that there's no good or bad of this. The words strong and weak give the perception that it's good or bad, but it's not. Because honestly, there's good and bad from both constitutions. Now, a strong constitution is let's flip to some irises first here. This is an example first of a weak constitution. And how we would define that, again, if you're looking at the lines that go from the pupillary border to the iris border, and they extend out across there perpendicularly all the way throughout the iris, the closer or more tight-knit they are, the stronger the constitution. Well, it's very obvious with this one. You can see all the gaps in the trabeculae all through here. So this particular person happens to be a weaker constitution. So with this client, I would be explaining to them that based on their parents and whatever they consider their source, they actually have a weaker constitution. Now, the pros of a weak constitution, if you have one and you do something wrong in your life that is something less than empowering for your health, whether it be taking on too much stress, eating poor food, not sleeping enough, your body will tell you, and it will tell you in a big way. You're going to go through a lot of stress, and you can't wait to get home and just lay on the couch because it just exhausted you, right? But and really to a level, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be nice to have your body tell you when you do something wrong? But the challenge with that is the stronger or the weaker constitution, you really can't push that hard. But you can actually recognize when you're pushing harder than you should, because your body will tell you right away. Now, the opposite, and this is somebody who you can tell the difference here. Look at these trabeculae, how close-knit and how tight they are. So this is somebody with a really strong constitution. So this person, I would be telling them, and what's really cool about this is these are people who usually just first walk in, on their initial assessment. I really don't know much about them. I take an assessment, but I purposely don't look at it before we meet, because I don't want any preconceived judgment in my head of what's going on with them. I want to see what's going on with them with, really kind of like naked eyes, basically. So this person, I would be explaining, well, based on your iris, you're the go-getter. You push through. You take the bull by the horn. Something falls in your path, you just bull right through it. You could probably miss a few hours of sleep and function at a high level. You could probably miss a meal, eat a poor quality meal, still function no problem. And you could probably take stress up to here. And every time I've gone through that little spiel with the strong constitutions, they're like, yeah, that's me. And they're really kind of excited about that. And on a level, I have a stronger constitution also. And there are some great qualities of it, but the dysfunctional part or the challenging and disempowering part of a strong constitution, you don't have early warning signals. So you can really make poor health practices for long durations of time, year after year, until one day It's like, bam, it just hits you, right? And that's the person who everything seems to be going great. They take care of themselves. They're working hard, nose to the grindstone. They've got a great business. They're everything to their family. They're a runner. They work out. They work with the community. They help at their church. And it's just go, go, go. And then one day they have a heart attack. And everybody's like, oh, how did that happen to John? He's always been so healthy and so vibrant. How did he have a heart attack? Well, it's the strong constitution. Sometimes it's a blessing and sometimes it could be a curse. So what I'm always telling people who have strong constitutions, when you come in and that's easily assessed, and I had to face this, many years ago when I was actually going through this. When I first learned that I had a strong constitution, it was before I moved here to California. I was living back in Illinois, and I had my own private practice, and I was working alongside Dr. Mercola in his clinic in the Chicago area. And I was working 6 days a week. My Wednesday, I started at 7 a.m. at Dr. Mercola's clinic. I worked till, I think, 1:15. I had 45 minutes to get to my office in Hinsdale. And then from 2 o'clock until 8 o'clock, I was back to back with clients there. And why did I do that? Because I could. You have a strong constitution. So I finally learned about this, and I learned that the stronger constitutions have to take more responsibility for really being the what is it when you have a car and you have something to keep it from going too fast? I can't remember this is a governor, yeah. So you have a governor on the vehicle or a motorcycle or something. It keeps you from going too fast. Well, the strong constitutions have to regulate their governor all on their own. It has to be completely conscious. So when I moved to California, I went from that crazy 6 days a week, seeing 50 people every week and just go, go, go all the time. That's why I have 3 client days. Because if I keep burning like that, I can. But I don't want to be the guy who you're all standing at my casket saying, I can't believe it happened to Glenn. He's always been so healthy and so vibrant. So knowing that is a key. And the other part of it is the stress factor. If somebody has a strong constitution and you can push stress up to here, all the way up above your head, where do you push it to? You always push it up to there. So the healthy level of stress for a strong constitution is probably down here. And again, you have to self-regulate that. That's why it's the same thing with myself, because I know this. I'm actually going to regulate the amount of stress that I'll let myself get into, because I could typically push it further than would be healthy. And that is an iris that, I'm just joking. Of course, that's somebody that's on drugs. We won't even talk about that. So the other one that's interesting is the colon reflex of health. I brought that up briefly earlier. And the colon reflex of health, also known as the collarette to other people who have studied iridology. So it's basically, what does the iris tell us about the colon as well as the rest of the digestive system? And what is the significance of the colon reflex on both the physical and emotional body? So we'll look at some pictures here first. So this one is a little bit blurry, but it shows a good outline. Notice you've got the pupillary border, and then that next line just outside the pupillary border where you can almost trace that line, okay? So that area inside of there is known as the collarette or the colon reflex of health. Within this area, you will actually see signs of the colon, the stomach, and the small intestines. Now this happens to be, all right, somebody tell me which iris this is. Is this left or right? Looks like it's leaning a little bit more this way, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so then this is a right iris. So when you're looking at this and you're looking at first the colon, so this would be this area right here, just at about 6 o'clock would be the area of the cecum. So as the small intestine is entering the cecum. And then if you follow that up around clockwise from that 6 o'clock up until really about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock there, that's the ascending colon. And then coming up across up until right here, so all the way across the top if you go flat, that would be the transverse colon, but only on the right side of the body. Yeah, because if you want to pick up the other side of the body from the colon perspective, small intestines and such, you would look at the other iris. Now, when you're looking at the other part of the iris, so from that 1 o'clock area down to the 6 o'clock, that would be significant of the small intestines. And if you look at the area just outside of the pupillary border, but not quite to the edge of the collarette, that's significant of what's going on in the stomach. Yeah, so in this particular person, you can see that there are some challenges, over at, when you're looking at this straight on at 9 o'clock or so, you see a lot of pits in that part of the iris. So where you see those pits, that's the depth. Those are the lacunas. That tells us that that person has a predisposition for challenges in that area. So that would be the ascending colon. And you start to look at the different signs and what the iris is telling you there. And one important point to make that I talked about earlier, but that part that you can trace and draw, you want to be able to see it. All right, because if you can't see that, then that's another lack of integrity for the digestive system. The level of predisposition as this iris that we're looking at right here, but when we look at this is still predisposed for challenges in the digestive system, but just for different reasons. Because everything's so close. This is a person who I would expect them to be constipated. I would expect them to have challenges eating foods that really don't work for them. Because some people are like trash cans; they can eat anything, and some people, are really they have to be so careful about everything they eat. And this particular person would be somebody who probably has to be very careful. And if they go off the path of what they need to do nutritionally, whether it be truly food or even you think of to the fact of like if this person's eating and they're stressed out, that reaction of the nervous system with their digestive system is really going to shut things down for them pretty quickly. So those are other areas to look at. And lastly, here's another one. Now this one, right, first question, strong or weak constitution? Strong, right? Okay, so everybody's correct there. But this person, you can notice that there's very little line to even follow here. So it shows another predisposition for weakness. And also, I wanted to bring this one up because when we mentioned earlier about the border of the pupil, and if the black is extended, that's typically low stomach acid. So see that? I mean, there's no defined line there at all. And it's not an accident. You notice the white haze throughout the iris. So this person, their body's pH is overly acidic because, again, they're not producing enough stomach acid. So easy things to actually learn with the iris. And one more example, and just different from a different perspective. Again, this one is very hard to see the line of the collarette, right? And part of it is because there's a pretty significant orange pigmentation in that area. See all the orange in through here? Now, what we're going to learn in a little bit is the pigmentation itself does correspond to a particular challenge in the body, but wherever the pigmentation is, it's also a suspect weaker constitution in that area. So when you have the collarette completely loaded with the pigmentation, it's just another added potential of a weakened state for that person genetically. All right, so pigmentation. We've been talking a little bit about this, but now we get a little bit deeper into what the different colored pigmentations mean. So the significance of the difference of the color. If you have a light cream or like a straw yellow, we mentioned that earlier, somebody with a blue iris who has a yellow pigmentation, the iris would appear green. Remember I mentioned that that's the kidney. If there's a pinkish red or a light red, that's more of a gastrointestinal challenge. If it's an orange to a shiny orange, it's more of a pancreatic issue. And if it's a brown to a black brown, it would be more of a liver issue. And then also, as mentioned just a bit earlier, there's also significance of the location of the pigmentation. So that's the fun thing about, to me it's obviously all fun and cool, right? But the fun thing for me, when you have a pigmentation, the pigmentation itself means something, and then where it is means something. And even a bigger challenge is if you have a particular pigmentation over the area of the iris that part of the body corresponds to, that's just another red flag. That's something to really pay bigger attention to. And I think I have some orange ones here. I'm going to give you a couple stories of some people. There's an orange one, right? So that is actually a dog's iris, and this guy does not have major pancreatic issues. It's just a little bit different with a dog. And so here's an example of some pigmentations. You could see up at around 1 o'clock or 1:30 at the edge of the iris there's a brown pigmentation. You can see a brown up about like 11:45. You can see more brown at about 8:30 and 9 o'clock. So the browns actually correspond to liver challenges, potentially gallbladder. Right now, you see all the orange pigmentation just outside the pupillary border. And again, the orange ties into the pancreas, and you also want to pay attention where it is. When we look at, and actually, when I'm talking about that, why don't you go ahead and pass that around to people? I think we've got enough for everybody.
Are those brown spots similar to brown spots on your skin, like liver?
Yes, they're similar on that level, but different from this point of when something develops on the skin, it's usually already a deeper issue. The iris, you can have a pigmentation that you're born with. It just shows you have a genetic predisposition, but it doesn't mean you have to have it. And that's the one thing with that I think is also important. I'm glad you asked that, because it's an important statement to make. When you have a pigmentation and it's brown, it doesn't mean you have a liver challenge and you have to be worried that you're going to have cirrhosis of the liver or something like that. It just means that you're predisposed for liver challenges, so take care of the liver. Watch how much you're drinking from an alcohol perspective, or if you do, you only drink after you've eaten a meal, so you're not just getting the alcohol absorbed through the stomach. You pay attention to the emotions of anger, since anger plays a big impact in liver function. So you look at the little things that you could be very preventive, so you don't have to develop this. And I might have another orange one. If I get another orange, I'm going to, so here's another example of some pigmentation. So we can see the orange pigmentation all around the area of the collarette, a brown patch at about 6 o'clock. Again, the orange ties into pancreas, brown tying into the liver. And then now you start to pay attention to where you see the pigmentation. Now, this pigmentation is most thick right around this area, and if you guys are looking at the map, and for those that are watching the replay, you will have a map of the iris coming up a little bit later in the presentation. But where you see the orange buildup around that area, that's the area of the lymphatic system. Right, so now this person, you're not only thinking pancreas, but you're thinking lymphatic system. And to take it one step further, see the little pillows of orange on the outside of the iris? That is the second area of the lymphatic system. So you start to think with this person, it's the lymphatic system, and really is kind of like the forgotten system of detoxification, because our toxins move from the tissue in the body to the lymph and then to the blood, where then hopefully, if everything's working correctly, it goes out the kidney, bladder, urine, liver, colon, falls off on the skin, or comes out through our lungs. But if the lymphatic system is sluggish, now you tend to hold the toxicity in the body, and it's not as dangerous when we're holding the toxicity in the fat, because that's the body's preferred place for toxicity. But if you happen to be overly toxic or too lean, and you don't have the fat to store the toxins in, now your toxins get stored in connective tissue and nervous system tissue, and it can be very painful and a very debilitating aspect. And I think one thing I'll share with this, and this goes back to a client back in my days at Dr. Mercola's office, who this woman walked in, and she was in her, I don't remember her age, young 30s, maybe 32, 33, obviously very fit, very lean, very athletic, but yet, and really just a very youthful face. Like everything seemed health-wise really going for her, but she walked in like she was about 80 years old. She could barely pick up the 1 foot and move, and I'm thinking, how does this woman look so athletic? And she could barely move across my floor to get in my office. And she plopped down on the chair, and just like my first words with her, she burst into tears. And what had happened to her is she had learned on the internet the dangers of mercury fillings, which I agree with that. I'm actually somebody who I used to have a seizure disorder tied into that myself. But she learned about the danger. She had a mouthful of mercury. She went to a conventional dentist who doesn't recognize dangers of mercury, and had them all removed at once. And she got hit with a major toxic load of mercury. And because she's so lean and didn't have much fat, and she's just all muscle and like lean tissue in her body, it all went to connective tissue and nervous system tissue. So she immediately became almost handicapped. So to know that there was a good ending, it sounds funny to do this, but we fattened her up. We gave her a diet plan to actually put on about 20 pounds of fat. Then we started working on detoxification. She finally detoxified. The lymphatic system was clear. She got her life back, and then we put her on a nutrition plan to lose not the whole 20 pounds. We told her, let's only lose 15 of it, because maybe you were too lean in the first place. But those are some of the things you pay attention to. And you look at how the lymphatic system is playing a role within the whole body. Now here's another example of pigmentation. It's another really strong iris, a strong constitution with the yellow pigmentation. And an interesting story with this one. 1 second while I drink some water. An interesting story with an orange pigmentation is back in Illinois, there was one time I was at a health fair, and I had my camera there, and I'm doing these little, I'm taking pictures of people, we're scheduling little 15-minute assessments, and it was just a complimentary quick assessment. It was just a fun event. Well, I had one woman who came up, and she sat down, we took a picture of iris, and she had an orange pigmentation, but it was right smack darn and deep and dark right in the area of the pancreas, right here at over about 4:30, 5 o'clock, as you can see by your map you're looking at. And I told her, because I don't want to use this as a fear-based thing or to scare anybody, but I just told her, I said, the next time you go to your doctor, do yourself a favor, and when they run a blood test on you, check not only glucose, but look at insulin also. And, that was it. I told her a few other things about her iris, and as far as I was, knew she was out of sight, out of mind, and I would never see her again. 2 weeks later, not even, it was about 10 days later, she shows up in my schedule at my office in Hinsdale, and she comes in, and she went to her doctor after I told her that at that little health fair, and she had him run a glucose and an insulin panel, and she was diagnosed a type 2 diabetic. And she said, after that, I had to come in here and see what the rest of this is telling me. Now it didn't mean she was going to be a type 2 diabetic, but she definitely had the predispositions, and it was something that, since I knew, I didn't think I would ever be working with her, so I just wanted to give her some information of what to look at the next time she went to her doctor. Here's another example. You see the orange pigmentation around the collarette, a little bit of an orangey, kind of like almost an orangey brown at about 6 o'clock, and over there at about 7. And the one that, it's important with this one, notice the pupil is floating a little bit to the left, so this is the right iris. And notice that this brown pigmentation is also very close to the area of the liver. So when you have the brown pigmentation, which is a liver pigmentation in the same area of that part of the body, that's another red flag to pay attention to for that person. And then here's the, for those looking at the replay, this is the map that you can actually look at to understand how your body shows up, in this segmented way by looking at the iris of the eye. And this map has been developed again over the last 3,000 years. Most of the development happened, as mentioned, with the Germans over the last 500 years, and it really hasn't changed much recently. Because I think they've refined the scientific end of this and moving away from the art of it more into the science of it. And then one of the last things we're going to talk about is lacunas. We had mentioned that briefly before. The lacunas they're little marquee shapes that can be open-ended, they can be closed-ended, there can be leaf lacunas, there's different types of lacunas, but basically wherever you see a lacuna, that's an area of predisposition as far as challenges are concerned. So you really want to pay attention to areas on that one. So a couple things to make a point for right away. Most people, when they first see this picture, they'll notice a lacuna right there at about like 7 o'clock, and it looks really big, and most people will think, oh, that's got to be horrific, it's so big, and that's a big challenge. Well, honestly, that's not that big of a challenge. The really big, shallow lacunas are mild predispositions, as compared to, if you look in this iris, and if you look at about 1:30, and you see a smaller lacuna, and it's a little bit darker, the smaller and darker, the more potentially problematic they are than the larger and shallow. So that this lacuna right here would be more of a suggested issue than the one that's small and dark up at 1 o'clock would be more of a suggested issue than the one down there at about 7 o'clock. So you look at the different places they are, and also the depth. And this iris, which is obviously a left iris for a couple of reasons, but the number one, you can see that the pupil is leaning more towards the right, and in this one you can see the sclera itself. And in this iris you can tell that this is a female. Do you know how you can tell that? Mascara? Yeah, not that you can always use that as the telltale way to see if it's male or female, but that's always that's one of those silly iridology jokes. But you can see the lacunas here. Down at about 6:30, a larger lacuna, not very deep, so not as big of an issue. But if you go all the way up to about 1 o'clock again, Notice that that lacuna is small and dark, so that's potentially a bigger issue. When you look at the one up right there about 12 o'clock in the middle of the iris, that's maybe a little bit bigger issue. Yeah, so you're paying attention to where these lacunas are and their size. And this is some of the great things that you could do with the iridology camera that I use. If you ever really need to really hone in on an area to see what you're looking at. So this one is an iris, and you're looking at the lower outside portion of, I can't tell if it's an inside or outside portion of the iris, but you can see the lacunas. You know, and that lacuna at about, that's about 4 o'clock. You know, it's a small lacuna, and there's some depth to it. And then just below that, another one with some depth. So this is an area in this. Now this person's, this is most likely right around the area of the pancreas. And then you could also tell that there's an orangey brown pigmentation around there. So there's multiple different areas. And this would be somebody who I would want to see what's going on with glucose, what's going on with insulin, potentially an A1C, just to have a little deeper information on them. And and you'll see why this says it up here. So from Roberto Kaplan, never judge, just be with what is. You know, and the reason why I say that is we're going to go look at some other irises that some of them we might look at and be like, ooh, you know, oh, that's terrible. But it's not about them being terrible. It's just recognizing where we're at. You know, that's the key point here. You know, so this iris, weak or strong? Yeah, very weak, right? And look at all this iris is not only a bit of a weaker constitution, but it's riddled with lacuna all over the body. And when you start to see this like flower petal effect that you can see on this iris, that's also very well known for people who are predisposed for endocrine dysfunction. You know, so there could be some significant pancreatic, adrenal, thyroid, pituitary. There could be a lot of issues from that level with this person. And look at some of the lacunas also. Look at down at 6 o'clock. Look at that small one right there, right in the middle of the iris at 6 o'clock. Yeah, so that's in the area of the kidneys. Like a few of these are really deep and dark over here. Yeah, so and when you get down that very middle portion of the kidney area, that also could not only kidneys, but it also could be that particular. This is a right iris because it's leaning a little bit toward the left as we look at it. So this could be this person's not only left iris, not only their left kidney, but it could be their left hip, leg, knee, foot, ankle. So you want to look at all those possibilities. But when you get this type of information, when you're not really exactly sure what it is, you just get inquisitive with that client, you know, or maybe you do some testing, you see what's going on in those areas, and it's uncanny, like how many times that I can ask somebody, you know, like I might find a weakness in their left shoulder clavicle area. So I'll ask, have you ever hurt that area of your body? And you'd be amazed how many times, oh yeah, I had surgery on that 2 years ago, or I fell on that 5 years ago and it did this, I'm still having problems with it. It's amazing how many times you see these things come up. And I'll have a couple more stories as we go along, but one of them was pretty amazing. It was a woman who came in to see me, and she had a significant health issue, but she didn't share what it was. You know, she just wanted me to do the assessment on her, and we're going through the assessment, and she had a relatively clean iris, but I told her, I said, you know, what I'm seeing here is we're looking at major lymphatic issues, and there's a lacuna right near the area of the jawbone on the right side. And as I told her that, she started crying. And when she kind of gathered herself from that, she told me she has lymphoma, and it's metastasized in her right jaw. And she says, how did you, I told her, I didn't see cancer. You can't see cancer in an iris, even though people will tell you they can. You can't. You know, but you can just tell where there's issues. Now you put it together, significant lymphatic issues, you know, that area, it really hit her pretty hard and solid with that. This is another example, and if you notice this iris, not only are there many different lacuna right all around the area of the collarette, you can see all the stress rings. You can see the stress rings on the as you're looking at the picture on the left side going down to the lower portion. And notice with this iris, this is not a focus issue. Notice that toward the outside of the iris that there's like this whitish haze there. Yeah, so that white is potentially either too high of cholesterol for that person, or mineral buildup in the body due to poorly absorbed minerals. So it gives you just a little bit more information of what goes on with that person. And as Dr. David Pasick, who I'm very grateful for teaching me this intense level of iridology that not only looks at the functional part of the body and the iris, but also looking at the mental, emotional aspect. His words, love and wisdom creates our masterpiece, and that really is the iris of the eye. And that's it. So if anybody is, for anybody, whether here in the office or anybody listening to the replay, as far as iridology is concerned, if you're local in the area, obviously you can come in the office. You get to put your chin and your head in this apparatus that I'm showing here at the office, and we get some great pictures. It's not like being at the eye doctor. I don't blow any air in your eye or anything. We just get a really great picture. And then from there, it goes into my computer. It gets pulled up on the screen, and we go through your individual iris. Now, for people who are listening to this that aren't anywhere near Southern California, because there's probably people listening in not only other parts of the United States, but other parts of the world, you might think that you can't do iridology, but you can. Because even years ago, prior to me moving here to California, I had a business connection here. And there was a wellness facility that I used to do some work for while I was back in Chicago. And what they did is they had the same iris camera that I do, and they would take pictures of irises. They would email them to me. I would pull the picture up on my computer. I would do the complete iris analysis. I would do a report. I would email the report to them. Then they would call in their client and go through the report. So it works easily, even being out of town or out of country, because you just have, and nowadays, heck, even the phones on our cameras on our phones are good enough to do this. You just need a good, clear close-up of your iris, of both irises, and you just email them to me. I would go over those with those people on the phone. You would get the same map that you're getting in the presentation. And for those who are local, it's kind of fun when you take the picture and you put it up there and you see it right away rather than waiting, a week or two to get something done on that level.